Welcome to Future Foodcast. I'm Pam Miller, your host. I had not thought about agriculture and the ocean going together. I always think about agriculture and land, but today's guest is going to tell us how they definitely go together. We have Luke Young with us. He is the CEO and co-founder of Allura. Welcome to the show, Luke.
Hi, Pam. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, indeed. Allura is all about that. How do we connect food that we grow in our fields into the oceans? And I cannot wait to dive in. I'm really excited about this. Thank you for having me.
Well, what even gave you this idea? Like, how did you even get started trying to combine these two things?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think I really started for myself is I've always been fascinated by biology and genetics and understanding how like all living things are built up by just these individual cells that encode all the instructions to create really anything you see in a whole organism. And that baffles me still today and fascinates me all the same. And growing up in a very rural part of England, seeing a lot of agriculture, being very rooted in that kind of industry and community. Everything I started to approach biology with was always through that lens of food and how do we understand our food and, you know, how do we maintain healthy, active lives? But that's always really comes back to the foundation of food. And so when I went off to university to study biology and get really in depth into my genetic understanding, it kept on coming back to the question of how can I translate this to food for my life? How can I bring that into the industry? And I was always wanting to try applications. I got kind of interested by academia and wanted to dive in a bit more into research, but I really wanted to see how I could create things that would then benefit people's lives. And so said, I'm young. I don't fully understand the industry yet, but what are the problems? How can I actually bring this to the hands that need it? And so looked at the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals.
Ah.
And number two, there was no hunger. And that really caught my attention because my understanding, I'm very optimistic as a person, very positive, and I was like struck by how developed our world is and how incredible we are in being able to build these new technologies. So why is hunger so prevalent? Over 600 million people, it's fluctuating between 600 and 800 million. And it's how are that many people still malnourished today? And so I took a deep dive into agriculture and the relationship we have with our land. And for 12,000 years, we've domesticated crops. We've grown them on soils that seem fertile. And that's been a brilliant system. That's got us to where we are today.
Yeah.
But we're now starting to see those cracks. We're now starting to see the limit of not just our world and our resources within that world, but also the applications that we've made to bolster that to feed the people as well. So, for example, chemical pesticides, chemical fertilizers, people are starting to take a much more conscious approach with this right now as well. And so my understanding of this was, what do these crops actually need? Why did we put them in the farms and the soil in the first place? And I took that very much down to the very basic principles of what do plants need to survive and thrive. And that really breaks down into two main areas. You've got your water, which normally we think of as fresh water, but two-thirds of our planet is covered in salt water with water within it. And if you can get past that salt, you have a plentiful supply.
That's
And
right.
then also the nutrients. And so trying to just translate that and say, how do we then see this opportunity of the oceans as something we can apply to our agricultural system?
Wow. So you actually, from a young age, had some interest, and then it got more mature as you matured, and you were just trying to seek resources to figure out how you could apply your intelligence and innovation to this space. And what did you come up with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think through a stroke of luck and a serendipity, I was flying over to see my friend in Norway at the end of my university. I was celebrating, was happy to be done and like now be able to apply what I wanted to create. And I saw this oil tanker on the surface of the ocean. It was floating there quite stably and active, and it kind of made me start thinking about all these different things we do in the ocean. But it was tiny. It was absolutely minuscule, a millimeter wide, a few millimeters long, and outside of that, straight to the horizon was just blue, just open blue. And that really struck to me the potential of what our oceans can hold. And so I spent a year trying to basically say, if we're going to take these crops that can have this water, have these nutrients, have a flotation device, what does that look like? And so I contacted all the experts I possibly could, who are very kind. I thank them all if they're watching this to be able to actually say, thank you for giving me that boost, that start, because I asked them question after question in how does a structure even survive in the ocean, and what genetic components are responsible for salt tolerance. And then I built essentially these two starting technologies, that then became three over time. The first was the salt tolerance. That's what we're known for. That's what we've been focusing on, and that's what we've achieved, is being able to develop this salt tolerance that we found as a pattern. And so this pattern is essentially what is found from things like seagrasses, mangroves, anything that already survives in the oceans themselves or in high saline environments. And apart from the unique adaptations, we also find this consistent pattern of genes is always appearing, the core set. And so we said, okay, well, these aren't crazy genes. They're not, highly adapted to these particular scenarios. They're actually found in things like rice and corn and soybean and wheat and strawberries and lettuce. They're just not used because for 12,000 years, we've been growing in soils that don't have salt in high quantities. So they haven't been active, essentially rusted over. And so
Okay.
we unlock that, we strip that clean. And we allow them to then be expressed in a really strong way that mimics what you see in the ocean. That's been fine-tuned to be found in particular places in the plant, and to particular levels. And then we have the flotation device as well, if you'd like to dive into that.
Well, I would, but first of all, I kind of want to say with these plants that you're working with, or the crop that rice is the first one, it's not with this genetic situation. It's not you, how we say you use it or lose it. They didn't use it, but it just kind of goes dormant. It's still there.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so you're kind of just waking that up and figuring out a way to utilize it, because you can then assimilate it with the ocean.
That's exactly it. It's exactly it. Similar to how, a volcano lies in rest over decades and decades and then suddenly erupts. It's the same thing with these genes. They've just lied dormant. They've lied dormant, they've rusted over, and we're just cleaning them up and allowing them to be expressed just how they normally would, how
That's
you find
amazing.
them.
Amazing innovation. So, all right, let's dive into that. You had to figure out how to hold these crops in the water. So tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, this is an area that I had no expertise in. So this was an area I was like, okay, I need to tap into some incredible mindset. And we were very lucky in that when we first launched the company, we went over to San Francisco for 6 months, but we didn't have US visas. And so we couldn't stay there. We attended a program, attended some conferences. It was fantastic. And we were like, okay, we want to be within North America. So we settled up in Canada, and very, very luckily, we actually situated next to arguably one of the best engineering schools in the whole of North America and arguably the world as well. And so we tapped into their student body, their minds, and we built this system that essentially has three main parts to it.
Okay.
So the outer section is a hexagonal ring, a buoyancy ring, just as if a child was in the ocean or you're rescuing someone. And it's a hexagonal because it allows us to tessellate in size as easily as we want. So you can have a very small farm just on your lake, or you can have as much or as large as you need it to support an entire country. And so with these hexagonal rings, all they're providing there is buoyancy, structure, and the ability to flex as the motion of the waves forces the actual farm to move inconsistent with those waves. And so we have that hexagonal ring. On top of that goes a platform. And at the moment, we've got this platform made out of HDPE, so very known material within deep sea pipes, used within all types of applications. We want to make that a bit more sustainable. So we are looking for some material alternatives right now that are not only sustainable, but also have high buoyancy. And that really is providing a little bit of surface tension. So again, providing that buoyancy for the crops, but at the same time, it's providing a structure for the real magic to bind to. And so this magic, which is mind-bogglingly cool, in my opinion, are these small espresso-sized cups. And essentially, they're 3D printed mesh lattice that completely mimics the structure of soil. And so you can tweak these to whichever crop you're interested in. We have them for rice at the moment. And in our last trial in freshwater, we were able to grow side by side rice in soil, fertilized as normal, our rice in these farms in a freshwater setting. And the freshwater ones, that once they both had come to yield, had produced 75% more yield, just because of
Really?
the mesh lattices, the density in which we're able to grow them. And so in that comparison alone, makes you quite interested in what we can achieve with ocean agriculture.
Okay, let's say that again. So the same amount of surface area essentially between the buoyant hexagonal floating farm and the land mass.
Mhm.
The water, the one on water, it was fresh water, produced 75% more yield. Okay. I just
75%
wanted to
more.
call that out. Okay. That's a lot.
75% more. I know, like I triple checked the numbers. I went in there and I was looking at it and I was like, yeah, no, this is correct. Okay, okay. 75% more. There's a combination of factors. We were able to fine-tune this. The first iteration we made, absolutely not 75% at all. Much, much less than normal. But it's fine-tuned. 75 iterations we went through to put together. 74, sorry, getting confused. 74 iterations, 75% extra yield because of how those meshes are created, the density in which we're able to grow these crops. And then now it's translating that into the ocean.
Okay. That's amazing. So what's the plan? What is your plan moving forward?
The big question.
Sounds great so far.
Right, exactly. We're just wrapping up right now. And since the last time we spoke, actually, this is new news. We're just wrapping up one of our trials, and this has been testing our rice, salt-tolerant rice, in salinity, and they've done extraordinarily well. They have outcompeted. So in the first 2 weeks, in the salinity we had the wild type, so normal rice, as if you're growing it in Louisiana or California, completely died, dried up, gone.
Oh,
Our rice is still growing 2 months later, just as if they had not been touched, and they're looking absolutely phenomenal. And
wow.
so for us right now, we're taking that through to yield. We're going to get that yield, make sure we've got it all signed off and looking good. And then we can show everybody that data and show everyone what we've created
Yeah.
here.
So is this going to change the cycle of the seasonality of being able to harvest the crop? Because
Yeah,
obviously on land they're drying up, but on the water they're still fine and growing well. So you can
yeah,
maybe extend our growing seasons or add on growing seasons.
absolutely. Yeah, as long as that temperature in the air is enough for what these plants require, you're all okay. So for rice right now, in most of the predominant rice growing regions, you can squeeze in about 3 harvests a year. With the way we're going to do it and the way we expect we're able to extend this out, we're expecting you can just grow them year round. So you could probably squeeze in 4 a quick growing variety, but you could continuously just replant and grow, replant and grow. Uh,
Okay.
and so for us, like a consideration there is actually making sure that it benefits the environment it's in. It's not just continually doing what we've been doing in soils and eroding the soil and then taking all the nutrients out. And so
Right.
we do that in a couple of other ways as well. So we've
Okay.
recently done an assessment on the actual material usage and the actual impact just without any crops on the ecosystem. And we've been able to fine tune that to a point where we're benefiting the biodiversity in the region now. So we're finding an additional habitat to colonize, which is essentially like creating an artificial reef on the surface. And so we're hoping to bring more and more organisms into that benefit the crops as well. And then on the crop side of things, we're using a bacterial fertilizer, so no chemical applications. Those bacterial fertilizers reduce that reliance on the water itself. And there's a whole host of nutrients on the bottom. So we're trying to leave that as untouched as possible as well.
Right. So you don't mess up the biodiversity there
Exactly.
in the water itself. Right? You're
Don't want to solve one problem, bring another through.
That's right. We don't need to create another problem. Well, so let's compare. All right, we have our current situation and then what you're proposing. And so what are some of the advantages of your methodology?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one that we've kind of alluded to through the last few minutes is fresh water. So agriculture today uses about 70% of all fresh water on Earth. Rice is 40% of all fresh water on Earth is used in rice
Oh,
agriculture.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So immediately off the bat, that's why we're focusing on rice. Not only does it feed over half the world's population, but it protects and really dominates most of that freshwater usage. So immediately we're using a lot less fresh water, really no fresh water in the whole process. We're using a lot less land. So in areas where you're getting a more intensive agriculture, it gives a moment for that agriculture not only to focus on perhaps more lucrative crops, but also gives the soil time to rejuvenate, regenerate, and then you can actually look at alternative ways to benefit from that land as well for any farmers. We want to work with farmers as much as possible here. What benefits them? What benefits us? How can we push that together forward?
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, you've got fresh water, you've got that land, and you've also got greenhouse gases as well. So rice is a really unique one for this, where in normal rice paddies, once you flood that paddy or introduce it into very saturated soils, you're actually creating the perfect environment for a particular bacteria to produce massive amounts of methane.
Mm.
And so it's about 100 million tons a year annually across the world, just 100 million tons. And so growing in the ocean completely removes that because you don't have that relationship with bacteria. It's not present in the salt water. It can't even grow in salt water above 14 grams per liter, which is about just less than half of ocean. And so you're completely safe in that regard. So if completely adopted across the rice sector, you don't have any methane emissions anymore. And you can actually then take it a step further, which my brilliant co-founder has designed a bacteria that can suck in methane from the atmosphere and then provide it to the crop in form of carbon, which
Wow.
you do through fertilizer. So yeah,
Okay.
do that. And then there's a whole host of like smaller benefits. We honestly, Pam, when we first started this, we were like, okay, we don't want to build it if we're going to just damage the ocean in the way we have our land.
Right.
And so how do we consciously create something that will not only solve world hunger, but also over time we've realized actually recreate and redesign the agricultural and food system from scratch
Right.
in a way that all the existing companies can actually have a part in it as well. And so all these newer companies coming through, all the legacy companies can operate in this whole sector and actually have a more beneficial impact while producing more food. So for us, it's a no-brainer, and really translating that into a scalable company right now is our priority.
Yeah. Well, and I think there are a lot of benefits in you figuring out for rice, but there's opportunity for other crops as
Absolutely.
well moving forward.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, corn is a really interesting one because of the heat that currently it's being impacted by and the yields around the world, particularly in the US as well. So, or maize. So being able to then put that in the oceans in more protected environments. And the way we create our salt tolerance, we expect to also see some heat tolerance as well. And so
Wow.
we've seen some early indications of that, and we'll be revealing more about that probably end of this year.
Okay.
And so trying to balance that and create this kind of new generation of crops that is adaptive to the environment, adaptive to climate change. So we're protected from higher temperatures, we're protected from salinity and a lack of fresh water. But it really is translating to all crops. That's the goal. That's the true aim is to have a complete agricultural system to support this.
Wow. That's amazing. Quite a lofty goal, but you've got a great start on the where you want to go. So, I mean, 75% additional yield, and I know you're doing other testing and studying and continually iterating in the proper direction. Well, thank you for sharing about how you got started and what's happening, because it's like a totally new innovative, we don't need to replace the current rice situation, although that'd be great, but we do need to add on to meet the needs of a growing population at a minimum. And then if we can, offload, like you said, some of that to be able to free up some land for maybe different crops or, you know, whatever we need to
Exactly.
do there, that there's just a lot of benefit there.
The whole food versus fuel debate. I mean, like, Brazil right now, it's what do we grow? What's best to grow? Why not grow both? Why, why not be able to grow both, double the land that you'd normally be able to grow it on, meet everybody's quota nicely.
Right, because you don't have to make a choice really. You've got an
Oh,
additional option that doesn't have the same resource of the land.
yeah.
And so that's really an exciting proposition. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience before we go, Luke?
Oh my goodness. I'd say I could talk for hours.
Oh, wow.
I would really say keep an eye on us over the next few months because we've been working for almost 5 years, 4.5 years now, on building this technology, building the many facets of it, because it really is, as you've said, Pam, such a huge and lofty goal. And we were like, if we're going to spend our time doing something, might as well be something big. And so we've been fine-tuning this, and we've been running into walls here, running into obstacles here. But we're at a point now where we've just basically removed all of those obstacles. And so we're going to be talking about things a lot more. We're going to be releasing a lot more of what our products actually are going to be, and we're going to be entering the market. So keep an eye on this space, and please do follow us where you can. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Allura, ALORA. Yeah, so please do engage as much as possible.
Great. Thank you, Luke. And thank you for sharing all this innovation and what your company's doing with Future Foodcast. I know our audience loves to hear about technology, innovation, what's happening in the food space. And this is certainly happening in the food space. So you can look in our show notes for links to Luke's company and do some further research. Thank you for listening to us. Please send us your comments and thoughts and subscribe so you don't miss the next issue. Until then, I'm Pam Line-Miller.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.